Hi, and welcome to the first lecture of Unit 5, where we're talking about Western Europe and political or governmental systems. So let's get started. This is basically just going to be a quick, dirty history of European governments. This guy in front of you, by the way, is Henri VIII, known for his many, many wives. A couple of whom died, a couple of whom he divorced, two of whom he had executed. So, some heads of government are better than others. So, in the Middle Ages, we're going way back now, Europe was mostly feudal, and this involved monarchs, or mostly kings, sometimes queens, ruling through local nobility, by which I mean kind of the bigwigs in a given smaller area. So like a count, or a duke, or a baron, that kind of person is a noble, and together they make up the nobility. This gives you an idea of some of the main kingdoms during that time period. You got the Russians over there, the Holy Roman Empire, the French, the English, a lot of different countries going on here. The thing about the nobles was that even though the monarch technically ruled, the monarch couldn't fully control the nobles. They definitely had their own spheres of power. So, using our terms from the reading you did, we could call these federal, in that there were kind of divided powers between the central area of the government and the kind of surrounding regions. And this is a monarchy. These are monarchies because a king or queen rules the kingdom. The Holy Roman Empire was one of these kingdoms, but it was really like more than just a kingdom. It was a band of kingdoms that were all kind of connected to each other. And as you can see from this map, which is a little blurry, but all the different kind of colors are different kingdoms within the empire. The Holy Roman Empire was, it was very mixed up, and each of the kingdoms basically ruled itself. So that was more of a confederation because there wasn't strong central leadership. But that type of thing didn't last by the 1600s, especially in places like, say, France. This is Louis XIV. A lot of the European monarchies, they kind of won out in a power struggle against the nobility. And they were able to concentrate power in one central ruler, and that made them a unitary system of government. Still a monarchy, but now unitary. So like France, say, was run basically from Paris, and the regions that helped make up France didn't have a lot of powers. But this didn't last. By 1789, and you probably know about the French Revolution, there was the French monarchy was overthrown, and it was an autocratic monarchy, meaning it was a kind of dictatorship, and in its place there was a democratic government set up. It was democratic because it was, in theory at least, and sometimes more and sometimes less, ruled by the people. However, across the English Channel, the British government was developing not in giant shifts like the French government was, but slowly over the years. And the absolute monarch of, say, the 1500s slowly evolved into a constitutional monarch because the Parliament, which is the British version of our Congress, slowly and steadily kind of chipped away at the monarch or the king's or queen's power. And that's basically what turns a monarch into a constitutional monarch. The people, through some representative body like Parliament, like a Congress in another country, take power over the monarch, and the monarch is still there. Like, say, Queen Elizabeth II is still the head of the UK, but Queen Elizabeth doesn't make the rules. She doesn't set up the laws. She doesn't command the navy, and so on. In the real sense, anyway. So that's a constitutional monarchy, which is generally democratic in nature. But the different countries of Western Europe weren't always on the same timetable. So Germany's monarch, who was called the Kaiser, he actually grew in power and became more autocratic, so more kind of controlling of his country, of his empire, really, up until 1918, when he was overthrown or had to step down at the end of World War I. And you can always tell the Kaiser because he's got this spiky helmet, and he usually has a silly little Wario-style mustache like that. But, okay, maybe it was a nice thing for the Kaiser to be gotten rid of, then you had a democracy, but the problem was that the democracy that followed the Kaiser, which was called the Weimar Republic, it was really weak, and there was a lot of infighting between the different parties when they were trying to control the legislature, and that allowed Adolf Hitler to step into power. Actually, legally, he was getting votes, but then he abolished other parties aside from the Nazi Party and took full control soon after he took power in 1933. So at that point, you had a unitary government because it was all basically the final word on any given issue came from Berlin. It came from the center, and it was totalitarian. And this is a really important word, and it basically means that the government controls every aspect of society and people's lives. It's a total government, which is a step beyond just a normal autocratic government. A totalitarian government is the kind of thing that you might have read about in, say, 1984, or in some ways, I don't know, maybe the Hunger Games counts as a totalitarian government, because it tries to even control what thoughts are possible. It controls the media, it controls communications, all those types of things. And the Nazis didn't just establish a dictatorship in Germany. They actually kind of extended their dictatorship to some of the countries they invaded. So after they invaded and took over France, they set up a pro-Nazi French dictatorship, which was not as authoritarian, not as totalitarian, rather, as the Nazi government within Germany, but still a very harsh authoritarian dictatorship. But, as you know, Germany lost World War II, and it was split into two different countries, West Germany and in the West, you had a democratic federal state, so it wasn't necessarily ruled entirely from Bonn, which was its capital city, and it was allied with the traditional Western powers, U.S., U.K., and France, and it did pretty well. But in the East, you had a government that was a dictatorship. It was not democratically run. It was an ally of the USSR, and in fact, the USSR kind of basically set up the East German government. Although, to be fair, the U.S. and the U.K. and France basically set up the West German government, and this East German government was nearly totalitarian. It was very authoritarian, controlling all the little details of people's lives. This picture is from a great movie called The Lives of Others, and there's a government agent who, sneaks around and lives in your attic and records everything that happens in your apartment, if you're a potential enemy of the state. So a very authoritarian government. But by 1989, as you may also know, the Berlin Wall fell, which was separating East and West Berlin, and that signaled the end of the division between East and West Germany. After that, shortly thereafter, the two different Germanys reunited, and they turned back into a single federation, so rule from the middle, rule from Berlin, which is the new capital, but also rule from the states within Germany, and democracy, so rule by the people. And the people, in all their wisdom, have elected Angela Merkel, who is currently the leader of Germany. Whew. And that is your quick discussion of current Western European governments. Good job.